Welcome to another episode of Woman Witness TV, The Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Today, I have a very special guest for you that I want to introduce you to. This is a woman who's out there making a difference in her community, making a difference in her life and in her family. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read to you and introduce my guest to you. Her name is Ursula Harris. She is a dedicated mother of two from the vibrant city of Chicago. She was born, oh my gosh, you're a Scorpio like me. Come on now. So I'm the third and she's the fourth. All right, let's go. And she's from a family of four. In April 2023, she courageously established Let's Get to the Root LLC, which she shines through as a certified life coach. Apart from her coaching pursuits, Ursula delves into the realms of music as a singer and songwriter. Her tracks Jesus and We Bless Your Name, which are amazing, are some of the various digital platforms and songs that Ursula has written. Music has served as a beacon of hope for Ursula since the age of 9. Merging her musical odyssey with her coaching vocation, through her latest publication, From Trauma to Triumph, Ursula aims to impact and transform numerous lives through her compelling narrative. Embark on a journey with us as we speak to Ursula Harris as she navigates her interesting story, discovering resilience and meaning, triumph, and challenges. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce to you Ursula Harris. Hey, Ursula, welcome to the
Leah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And I'm sorry I had to break up our introduction, but I didn't know that you were a Scorpio like me. Come on, girl.
Well, I'm not really big into zodiac signs, but that's what
Um,
people would that's what people would say. That's what people would say. But I'm definitely not necessarily into that.
I agree. I believe that you are who you are and your traits are whatever God gave you to. So, amen. Okay. Well, I'm excited to speak with you as an author who wrote books myself. I know that that is such a huge hurdle and a huge challenge. And for you to have done so is simply amazing. And I want to dive into your book and I want you to talk to some of our ladies who are listening here today about how we can go from trauma to triumph. So hopefully you're ready to share your story with us.
I'm so ready. I would just say thank you so much, Leah, for this amazing opportunity. Yes, like she said, I am Ursula Harris. I just released my first book, From Trauma to Triumph. One of the reasons why I felt the need to write this book was because God has brought me through so many things. And, sometimes it's easy to forget all the things that you've come through until you actually write it down, until you actually look back over your life. And so I've always known that there was something special about my life and what God wanted to do with me from a very young age. I actually have been singing all my life, but I started leading songs at age 9, and that's when I realized I had a gift on the inside of me. And so I always love to encourage people, whether it was in words or in a song. Even in a situation where the book even came about, God spoke to me and said, because a portion of my book, it talks about my children's father and how I chose a man based on my traumas. But I didn't understand at the time that that's what I chose him based on. And so
Yeah.
I remember riding in my car and God began speaking to me and saying, I was angry with this man. I was angry. I was fussing. You be in the car, you by
Yeah.
yourself in your own environment and you just going in and you
Yeah.
feel like you have the right to because they did you wrong or this and that. And God
Yeah.
spoke to me in that moment and said, Ursula, what was inside of you that caused you to allow that behavior? Because nobody can make you put up with toxicity for 15 years. That's
Mm,
a choice that you made. And so God said in that
mm,
moment, I need you to get back to the roots. I need you to get to the root of this issue. Where did this start at? That's just the manifestation of what you accepted, this toxic relationship. And what are the seeds that were planted that caused you to go in this direction of your life to begin with? And so that's where Let's Get to the Root LLC came from. And then last year, when I launched Let's Get to the Root LLC, God told me to share my testimony live on a Zoom. And so I invited people on, and they were so intrigued. They were jaw dropped by my testimony. And so God was like, that's not it. Then after that, I started bringing people on my platform they were sharing their testimonies, and God said, there is more. You
Oh
need
my
to
God.
be more impactful. And so that is where the book From Trauma to Triumphant came from, because he let me know that my book was going to be in the hands of people that I'll never even speak to. And so to change people from the inside out. Yeah.
Okay, I love that so much. And I can take this in many different ways, but I want to try to stay on topic because, I know that sometimes we have issues and we have deeply rooted trauma, right? So, from what I hear you saying, is that God began to speak to you and work in you to uncover what that is, right? So, I need you, you're going to have to break down the steps, which is starting at the seed, right? Because we have a lot of people who are listening who may be fearful of going to a therapist and talking about their trauma and making themselves vulnerable in that way. So hopefully you can walk us through how we can do that in our own lives. So start with telling us a little bit about your first chapter, The Seed. Can you share with us a little bit about how the traumatic event that happened acted as a seed in your journey?
Like you stated earlier, I was born and raised in the city of Chicago. I'm the third of four children born to my parents. And all of my life, my father and my mother, they were together about 18 years
Mm,
off and on. And they fought just about every day of my life that I could remember while they were together. Their relationship was very, very toxic. Throughout my childhood, my father was a drug addict and an
mm,
alcoholic. And
mm,
then my mother, on the other hand, was dealing with a lot of rejection and abandonment from her mother. She
mm,
never knew her father, and her mother gave her to her grandmother to raise from the age of 6 weeks old. So
mm,
my mother was raised by my great grandmother.
mhm,
So she never had that bond with her mother that she desired. She had two brothers at the time. So her mom pretty much left her and her two brothers in the care of their grandmother. And then she left and moved out of town. And then when she came back, she had more children. That is definitely rejection, because it's like,
absolutely.
if I'm not good enough, you had me, you gave me away, but then you come back with other kids. So now you take this woman who's dealing with rejection, who's dealing with abandonment issues. And
Yeah,
then you take this man who's dealing with drug addiction and alcohol addiction. His father abused him physically. My dad's mom didn't really speak up in that regard. So you
right.
take two broken people and put them together, and then they start having children. More than likely the children are going to be broken. And so I
Absolutely.
witnessed my mother and my father fighting. So that's fear. You look up, you're 4 years old, and your father has blacked your mother's eye, and you have to go to the freezer to get meat to put on her eye at age 4, and the police are standing outside, they're being called to the house, but when they get there, your parents send them away as if nothing
Yeah,
happens.
nothing.
So that's like a seed of dismissiveness, obviously ignoring the signs, that
Right.
things are happening. And so when you get used to this all the time, this is what you're experiencing,
Absolutely.
then that's what you take in, and that thing starts to grow in you.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely hear you and relate because I believe not only I heard you say a couple different things that I think that I can take away, and anybody who's listening who can relate to your story, that rejection thing is a learned behavior, right? And you said as you seen it growing up, and then also dismissing the obvious. I think how many of us, especially, in this situation, grew up in a place where they just said, don't talk about it. If don't talk about it, put it away. It's all right. So we dismiss it. Okay. All right. And you talked about how that affected you. Now I want to move to the root. So the root is your next chapter in your book. Trauma often has deep roots. So how did your traumatic experience manifest in different areas in your life?
So, the interpretation of what I'm experiencing, because one of the things that we have to understand as parents is that our children are not going to do what we say as much as they're going to do what we do. And
God.
so that thing took root in my life, because by the time I made it to high school and my interest in boys started to kick in, although I was this church girl going to church every Sunday of my life, I didn't go for the church boy. I went for the
Damn.
boy that was the bad boy.
Yeah.
I went for the rebellious boy. I went for the boy that was, living his
Yes.
best life and had multiple women and all this stuff
Yes.
going on. That's what I was attracted to. So that's the root, that's the manifestation of what I experienced, of the seeds that were planted in my life.
But
And so I
why,
began to
Ursula? Why do we do that? Do you have you
listen. I believe it's subconscious. It is a subconscious thing. It's
I
almost
agree.
like that's it's something that you don't even it's a learned behavior, and it's the manifestation of the unspoken things that happened in your life.
Yeah.
Nobody spoke to the obvious dismissiveness that didn't even have a name at that time, but
Mm,
my interpretation in my subconscious mind said that this is the type of man that I'm going to go after.
mm,
It's a subconscious thing that we do. and
yeah.
and and it's so it's so difficult, because then you have all of this stuff that now you got to try to heal from,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
all of the interpretation and the things that you experienced in your childhood. So
Okay. All right. That's good. I think we can all take a little piece of that. Okay. I don't know what is it about the bad boys that they just, anyways. So okay, so the fruit is the next chapter in your book. So your journey involves moving from trauma to triumph. What are some of the positive changes that started to emerge in your life after you begin healing?
you know what, after I began healing, I started to see myself the way God saw me. Again, back to that subconscious mind. When you're used to all of this dysfunction,
Yeah.
you get so used to it that you think it's peace because it's all you know.
Yeah.
So you get wrapped up in it. And so when God took me on this journey of healing and restoration, he began to show me that I was not my mistakes. I was not my mother and my father's issues. I was not, all of these things that I had grew up around. I was not the bad relationships, the toxic relationships that I chose. God began to show me who I was. And I began to utilize the gifts that he called me to, even the gift of singing. I began to sing, and I began to even, gravitate to people, because initially I would gravitate to people that were emotionally unavailable because that's what I was used to. But as God began to allow the good fruit to, because see, what happens is we got to uproot some of that other stuff that we've been taught. We got to unlearn some stuff. And so I had to allow God to put peace in me. I had to allow God to restore my joy. I had to allow God to show me that I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and I was created in his image, and that I didn't have to answer to those names that I had attributed to from my traumas. And so I began to flourish as this Ursula, the singer, the encourager, because sometimes we get so used to being hurt, and we get so used, Leah, to living in our dysfunction, that that's the only thing that we know ourselves as. But you're more. I want to tell anybody that's watching, you're so much more than what happened to you. You're so much more than your trauma. And so if we get to that place where we just allow God to journey us through our healing process, then that's where the changes began. And so I was able to appreciate even my mom for planting seeds of taking me to church and taking me, keeping me in ministry and all of those things. So
Man, girl, you are teaching us, okay? Let's just put that out there. Ursula, if I can, I don't know if I asked you the specifics, if you don't mind sharing, like what was that traumatic? Did your relationship end up mirroring your parents' relationship?
and I talk about that in my book. Not only did my father have issues, and that was one of the men that I saw my mother with. Then after she left my father, she ended up marrying a man in prison
Oh,
that she met through her friend. And so
mm,
she married him in prison. And when he came home, he moved right in with us. And
mm,
so I saw, like, here it is, another situation where this man is coming from prison. So, like, the
yeah,
expectation was like, kind of like, well, what is this going to be? And
right,
initially he seemed to treat her really good, but that
mm,
was short lived, because of course she gravitated to another man that spoke to her trauma. And so he started cheating, and he started being abusive and all of
mm,
these things. And so I chose a man that was in and out of prison. I
Mm.
chose a man. My dad never provided for us as we were when we were younger. My mother worked 2 and 3 jobs
Oh,
because my father did not provide for us. Now he was in the military and he had access to money, but he did not provide for his children. And
yeah.
I ended up choosing a man that was the same exact way, someone that did not provide for my children.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that cycle, right? It's
Yep.
that
It's that
cycle.
vicious cycle. Yes.
I gosh, I can totally relate. And I don't know why it is that we do it. And I could talk about me, but I'm not because we'll be here all day. I don't know why we do it. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's something that happens in our unconscious mind
Yes.
that
Yes.
we
It
just
does.
mirror what we see. We think, okay, so this is how it's supposed to be. This is
Yep.
that hurt and that pain. Now I know maybe
Yep.
I associate that with love because
Yes.
that's what my mom
Yes.
associated it with.
Yes.
So this is what
Yes.
love might feel. It must feel like.
Yep.
Ah,
That right there.
girl. Okay. All right. All right. All right. This is good. Okay. We talked about the fruit. Now I want to talk to you about your greatest fear. And man, we can just sit here and grab a cup of coffee on fear. During your periods of trauma, our greatest fears can often overshadow the ability to heal. So, share with us what your greatest fear was during your journey and how you addressed it.
Oh man. So I would say my greatest fear as I go into this chapter, one of the fears that I had that the enemy tormented me with all of my childhood was the thought of losing my mother. That
Mm,
was something that I toiled with all of my life, and I don't know why. But even as a little girl, if my mother would be gone too long, I would just automatically think somebody got her in the basement. I need to find her. I need to put out an APB on her. I need to put an alert out. Like it was
really?
always a fear because I think it was because she was the only parent that we could depend on. I mean, first of all, she mama, so everybody loved mama.
Yeah.
Period. That's mom. And then she was so dependable. Like she took care of us, and I think that it just subconsciously, I just felt like there was this fear of losing her. And so as I'm traveling through the chapter of the greatest fear in my life, my mother came to a point where she got sick. She ended up having this rare brain disorder that, really knocked her down. And,
Yeah.
my mother was a strong woman. So to see her ill like this, it was just devastating for me. So what I did in that time period was I took a semester out of school. I knew I was going to have to pay the financial aid back. I had just started and I had did it so late to the point where I was having to pay for the whole semester, even though I only went for a week. But I didn't care because I needed to take care of my mom. And so, we got her on the journey where she was recovering.
Yeah.
And then that following year, she was hit with ovarian cancer, stage 4 ovarian cancer. And so I remember getting the phone call from her because her stomach had swelled up so big. It was like she was 11 months pregnant
Oh my God.
overnight. And I was like, Mom, what's going on? And she said, I don't know. I'm going to go to the hospital. And I get a phone call from her saying, you need to come now. And I remember me and my siblings, we were all heading to the hospital, my family. And I got off the elevator and her doctor met me outside the elevator and pulled me into a room and said, your mother has cancer and it doesn't look good. We're going to give her about 2 weeks to live. And he began to share all of the findings with me because they had opened her up and went inside. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And so we began to pray. We began to believe God. Now, although the doctors were saying everything they were saying,
Mm.
I had to be strong for my mom. So, of course, I'm breaking down. And I was like, listen, I can't even hear no more. It was to the point he was talking, I couldn't hear him. And I went to the room with my mother and I gathered myself. And I remember my cousin, who was a preacher, and my sister were there. And we just began to pray. And we were like, we know what it looks like, but we're believing God. And do you know, long story short, the rest of it is in the book, but my mother began to turn around. We were able to listen. We signed her out of the hospital AMA because they were speaking death over her. They had
Oh,
already pronounced her dead and they were pumping her with fluids. Listen, and we were like, we're not going out like this. And my mother was like, we should not. And we got her out of the hospital and we called diligently to other hospitals in the area that would take her case. And somebody agreed. And my mother lived 3 years after that. Now, initially, she lost 100 pounds. So, look, you looking at it like, God, oh my God, this looks dim. But let me tell you something, there is power in your faith, there is
Yes.
power in trusting your Savior, Jesus Christ. Because, listen, what looked like it was over for man, God said, not so. And so he
Mm.
resurrected her, and she came back to herself almost to the point where people started saying she never had
She never
cancer.
was there.
But she did. She had cancer, and God brought her all of that way and allowed us to spend some amazing time together. And then that third year, she took ill. It came back with vengeance, and she ended up leaving us.
Oh. Oh my God. I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. But Ursula, the way you tell this story, oh my God. I pray that somebody is listening to this right now who was in your position when you took your mother out of that hospital and that 2 weeks turned into 3 years. I pray for 3 more years plus for anybody who is listening right now that has that bit of faith, that much faith. You ain't got to have a lot. Isn't that what you said, Ursula? You have okay. Ooh, Jesus. That was okay. All right. I didn't need permission. Talk to me about this because I think so many of us, many women, we struggle with being in the position where we are seeking validation, Ursula, and permission from others to step into who God has created us to be. And when did you realize that you didn't need permission?
All my life, I looked to my mother. And let me tell you this, my mother was such a big, amazing person and such an important person in my life that God revealed to me that I had made her my God. I had made my mother my God because I valued her voice so much so that I wouldn't even hear his voice. And so after my mother passed, as heartbreaking as it was, it came to a point where I was like, I had lost, well, let me tell you, I lost my unemployment. I was receiving unemployment.
Mm.
And the day my mother died, my unemployment stopped at no warning. Literally, that Friday morning, I woke up and there was no money in my account, and my mother passed away that evening.
Wait a
And
minute.
so, yes, 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 yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I had a baby the year prior to my mother passing, 11 months before. I had just, got laid off my job. It was perfect timing because I was able to be with my baby, my
Yeah.
mom, my unemployment was good. And the day she passed was the day I lost my income. And so you just imagine everything. I just had a baby. My son was 10. So now I done started over with a whole new baby, no income. And my mother just passed away. The devastation was something I couldn't even wrap my mind around what was happening. And so what I did was I moved out of town with my children's grandmother. She lived in another city, and so she welcomed me and my children with open arms. And initially, because my mother was very dominant throughout my entire life, very dominant, very controlling, and I valued her voice so much that I didn't do things simply because she didn't want me to. And so when I got up and I moved, I was looking around, almost waiting for somebody to say something. You know, is this okay? Listen, I'm 28 years old by now, but I didn't know what this was like because I had never walked. It felt like at that moment I was walking into womanhood for real
Yeah.
because now I can make decisions and I don't need to wait for nobody to tell me it's okay. And
Mm.
so, even though the situation that drove me to move to a different state were not the best, it was the change I felt like I needed to get my life where I needed it to be and where God was taking me. And just the idea that you're grown, you can live your life, and I didn't know. See, sometimes you're so bound that when you get free, you don't realize you was bound till you get free.
Girl, you better
So
stop.
listen, so when I got free, I didn't realize how bound I was and how restricted I was. And so that is when I really started to lean and depend on God for validation. And guess what? He'd already given to me before the foundation of the world was laid. He said, I chose you to be the focal point of my love in Ephesians 1, so he'd already validated me. I
Yeah.
didn't need the validation of my mother, my family, or anybody else. And so that is why that chapter is called I didn't need permission, because surely I didn't need permission. I was able to heed God's voice. And although in that season, because I was so broken and hurt from my mother's passing, and I felt like, as I look back, I was trying to find peace,
Yeah.
so I was making abrupt decisions, but God met me right where I was at.
Oh my gosh, Ursula, I can take this in so many different ways and run. Okay, hold on. Let me just recap a couple things that you said that really spoke to me. You said you did not know that you were free. Like you were free, but you didn't know how to be free. It almost, I was reading, I've been studying the book of Exodus, and oh my gosh, I know people are just like, Exodus, girl. Yeah. It's a long book, but it gives you rules. I now really understand that the children of Israel, when they were freed from Egypt, they didn't know how to be free.
Understand that that's
That's
in
a
my
good
book.
thing,
That's in my chapter. That's
isn't
there.
it?
The book, they were so used to dysfunction that they wanted to go back to what they were used to and what was normal for them, although it
Right,
was dysfunction. Yes.
right,
So you're
right.
right. You're right in the vein.
I'm trying to, I got goosebumps because when you said
Wow.
that, I get
Jesus.
it. I get it.
Yes.
I understand.
Yes.
And like what you said, and I didn't need permission because it was
Yes.
already inside of you. It's already
Yes.
inside of us to live a free
Yes.
life in the land of milk and honey, but we just
Come
sometimes
on.
don't know how.
We don't know how. We don't know how.
Okay. All right. I need you to give some advice to women who may be feeling trapped in a societal expectation or in in their family circumstances. Give them some advice on not needing permission.
Let me tell you something. God has already validated you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made,
Mm,
created in the image of God. And I'm going to tell you something. When you're trying to heal aside from God, it's not going to work.
mm,
So you're going to have to do just like I did. And you're going to have to allow the Lord to take your hand. See, it wasn't until I got in my word and I got into Psalms 139, and he said that before you were formed in your mother's womb, I already knew you. So
mm,
what God is saying is that, woman, I knew every mistake you was going to make.
mm,
I knew you was going to make that left turn and it was going to be the wrong direction. I knew you was going to have children out of wedlock. I knew you were going to marry a man that didn't love you or treat you well. I knew
mm.
you were going to have issues with your children and you were going to make some mistakes. But God says that before you were formed in your mother's womb, I already knew you and I chose you to be the focal point of my love. And so I need you to rest in the fact that I'm already validated. You don't need to look for validation from your family members, your parents, your children. Listen, sometimes you're raising your children out of guilt because of your mistakes you made when you were a younger mother, because that was me. And so I raised my children out of guilt. And listen, I overcompensated. And I want to speak to you right now and let you know you don't need to overcompensate. Listen, create an open dialogue with your children and say, yes, I messed up. I didn't know any better, but we're here right now. And allow the Lord to take your hand on this journey. Come on, because there's value to your life. You are not damaged. Listen, you are not too broken that God can't heal you. You are not too broken that He can't put the pieces back together for you. So if you would just open your heart, and by simply saying, God, it still hurts.
Yes.
God, it still hurts. Listen, that is an invitation for Him to come into your heart and heal those deep places and those deep wounds that you don't want to talk about, those things that you bury alive. God wants to heal those places.
Oh, Ursula. Yes, ma'am. Oh my God. Ooh, thank you. Thank you, Jesus. That was a word. Okay. Oh my God. Thank you. Let's go. Stir this up. Stir it up. Okay. I want to go into the moment. I'm going to skip over the irony, but I want to talk to you about the moment of healing. The healing journeys often have pivotal moments where everything begins to change. Can you describe your most significant moment in this healing process?
Listen, the book started off at the epiphany. And so the moment chapter brings you back to that moment in my car. And it was the starting point to the epiphany, where basically, I always say that my son was asking me, how should I write my book? And I said, start at that point where God met you. At that moment when God was like, listen, there was a light bulb went off. He tapped you on your shoulder and said, listen, we got to get this together. Because that is what God did for me in that moment. He tapped me on my shoulder while I was waddling in my confusion or my anger towards this man. And the Lord began to tap me on my shoulder and say, listen, if you would allow me to, I'm going to take your hand. He says, listen,
Mm.
your children's father only did what you allowed, but that's okay, because now that you looked over your life and you saw that the traumas that you dealt with in your family with your parents, listen, it's okay. But I want you to forgive your children's father. I want you to forgive your parents. And ultimately, I want you to forgive yourself.
Jesus.
Because, see, I was going through life and I didn't love me. I didn't even know that I was worthy of love because I was so used to doing for everybody else that I never stopped to consider Ursula. I never stopped to consider I was valuable. I never stopped to consider that my issues mattered or my thoughts matter. And in that moment, the Lord began to show me that you matter too. And I
Mm.
need you to forgive yourself. I need you to loose yourself. I need you to show yourself some grace, just like you do for everybody else. And that was the moment that I began to see myself not in my trauma, but I began to see myself victorious. I
Yeah.
began to see that I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and not just see it, I was able to believe it and walk in it because I let that thing take root in my heart. So
Mm.
God had planned, he uprooted, because he says in his word, I'll uproot anything that I did not plant. And so
Yeah.
God uprooted those things he didn't plant, and he planted those good seeds. And that thing started to flourish in my life. And I started walking with my shoulders squared back. And listen, that is when the Lord began to show me who I was, and everything changed. You're
Wow.
already who you are. You just got to get it. See, the enemy don't want us to get to that place of us knowing. It's one thing for everybody else to say, Leah, you're amazing. But if
Yeah.
Leah doesn't know she's amazing, then what good is it going to do? Because she's not going to be amazing. She's not going to act in the way of being amazing. She's going to always have doubt. But when God began to show me you're fearfully and wonderfully made, I began to say, okay, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. God didn't make no junk, and he made you.
Come on. Ursula, if you don't teach us today, okay, wait a minute. You said some good things we can't just gloss over. Okay. You said that when you told your son and you gave him something that you use in your own experience, you went back to the moment where God met you. It reminds me of John 4:6, what I named my book after. Jesus sat beside the well, and he waited for that woman. And it is very interesting because when we go back to where God met us, right when he called us, that's where all the mess is. That's the stuff we try to put behind us, right? And then you said another thing that I can't shake it. It reminds me of the story that Jesus told about the wheat and the tare and letting them grow up together. And eventually, once they're growing up together, God will remove those things out of your life that's not supposed to be, that God did not put there. Oh, this is good. Okay. All right. I gotta go. All right. Come on. Let's talk about the journey. The journey. The journey. Tell us about the journey. Can you expand a little bit on the challenges and setbacks you encountered on that path of time?
See, I'm going through my healing journey. And so, although God has met me in my car, and although I was able to release my children's father, release my parents, and learning to forgive myself, life was still happening. I still had two kids by raising by myself. So I just want to let you know that it don't mean everything gonna get easier because God is taking your hand, or that you're not gonna have any more issues. And so I began to, one of the things that I learned on my journey was to be honest. Because sometimes when people think you're healed, you put on this facade like, yeah, I'm healed, I'm good, everything's fine. And so you do that with God subconsciously. I was doing that with God. And God already know our hearts. He knows our thoughts from afar off. But guess what? I began to say, God, it still hurts. It still hurts. And God began to take my hand and he began to show me. I remember, I'll never forget, I was coming out of my complex and God began to say to me, I'm getting ready to heal you like it never happened. He showed me a heart across my windshield in that moment. And I saw the heart ripped open. And then I saw it slowly begin to heal. And then the scar disappeared right before my eyes. I said, what does that mean? He said, I'm getting ready to heal you like it never happened.
Jesus.
So what I had to do on my journey was be honest, be vulnerable. And
Mm.
when we can't trust nobody else to be vulnerable with, we can be vulnerable with our Father. He wasn't offended that I said I'm still hurting. He wasn't offended that I said, God, this is hard. He welcomes that. And that's how I learned how to go through gracefully, because I was able to rest on his shoulder and just be truthful with him and
Mm.
trust him.
Ursula. Yes, okay. Oh, okay. I know. Gosh, I'm sorry. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I need to talk about this right now because you're right in that place of honesty. Because if we are not honest with God, and I think that's a learned behavior. Okay. I want to put some people at ease because I know I have been there and I even struggle with it at times because we want to be so good, right? A learned behavior when we were children. Don't you want to be so good? And you're afraid that if you go back and you say to your parents, this hurts. This is not right. I have a problem. You're afraid of the consequences. You're afraid that they're going to think you're ungrateful. So we even approach God like that. And from what I hear you saying, Ursula, is that we don't have to walk around like we're together. We can come to God broken. He does the best work in broken people.
Yes. He's
And
close to the brokenhearted and the contrite. So he gravitates towards us because that's humility. That's saying, God, I can't do it without you.
yeah,
I can't do this without you. Maybe I've tried it on my own, and you try to, well, can I trust this person? You have certain friends, you say, I can't be vulnerable with them. They might shame me, they might say this, so that may be that fear. But I
yeah,
had to learn that God was not like man.
no, no, that's good. Okay, that's good. Now I want you to talk to us about how do we trust this process? How do we trust this process? How can we heal in the midst of it all?
That is really going into, and I kind of went ahead of myself, but that is that day when I said to the Lord, when he began to show me that image of his hand across my windshield. Trusting the process is trusting God, because sometimes you don't even know what the process is going to look like. You don't know what's ahead of you. So it's really giving God the leeway to say, you take the lead. You know that saying when we say, Jesus, take the wheel?
Yes.
It's
Yep.
saying, I don't know the story, but I know the author. I don't know how the story gonna end, but I know the writer. I know
Yeah.
the writer of my story. And so trusting the process is trusting that God will never leave me nor forsake me. Trusting that he's not going to lead me astray. Trusting that I can be open with him and I don't have to worry about my business being out on the street.
Come on.
Trusting that I can trust to heal and to give him the deep treasures of my heart, and that he's going to take those things and he's going to heal them.
Yeah.
He's going to make me new. And so trusting the process is trusting, come on, the creator, the
Yeah.
one that made me in the first place.
Yes. I want to talk to you about God's word prevails. You said trusting it, and faith often plays a significant role in our healing journey. So, how do your faith and your spirituality impact your journey, and what role specifically did God play in your overall triumph?
Let me tell you this. The Lord told me back in 2020 that he was going to bless me with a home. Now, many of us know we were all in the pandemic. I don't care what part of the world you were in. If you were alive, you were experiencing the pandemic. And so in that moment, I was working from home. I had this job that was just barely paying me enough to get by. And when the Lord spoke that, so like his voice was so clear and audible, he's like, I'm getting ready to bless you with a house. And I was like, okay, my circumstances didn't look like it, but I had already learned how to trust God. I had
Yeah.
already learned how to trust his word and his process, the process. And
Yes.
so what God did was he had me working at this position where I had gotten blessed with the position, making more money than I ever imagined making. And so, but in the moment of me getting that position, this was in a chapter before, the Triumph. I got that position, and I didn't realize at the time, I didn't remember that God had told me a year prior that he was going to bless me with a home. And so I was just working this job, making all of this money, doing all of this stuff. And
Yeah.
so randomly, I ran into a realtor that I had known for some years, and she began to tell me what I needed to do to get a house. It was so random. And it was like, God was like, ding dong, hey, knock, knock, I'm getting ready to do
Remember I
it.
told
And I
you?
was like, oh my God, I've been working at this job for over a year. I didn't even realize, almost a year. I didn't even realize this is what he was going to use. Do you know? I got with that lady. She told me what to do. I cleaned my credit up, and in 4 weeks, about 4 weeks, my credit score jumped up 100 points.
Oh my God.
Listen, I know it's unheard of to most people, but when God is in it, there is no
Come
limit.
on. Come on.
Listen, I had went and got me a lender. I had went house shopping, and that was in the month of December of 2021. By May of 2022, I was sitting at the closing table. The Lord had blessed me with a 3-story home for me and my children. So his word prevails. Even when we forget, he remembers. And he'll
Yes.
send you a reminder.
Yes.
So his word prevailed. Yes.
Come on with that reminder. You said the reminder, and this lady who you weren't even expecting, you weren't looking for her, she just came out of the blue. And, I want to just stop and just say this real quick. It is so important that we are welcoming the people that come into our lives out of the blue, because they may be sent by God to open the door that he said that he was going to open for you. Okay. You can triumph too. As we wrap up our conversation, what message of hope or encouragement would you like to share with the women who are listening to this podcast right now that are facing their own set of traumas?
Listen, I want to tell you, you may too have experienced trauma in your life. Maybe there's been seeds of negativity, rejection, abandonment, and all of those things. Maybe you're struggling to forgive your parents, your children's father, your husband, your father, whoever it is. But let me tell you, and you're probably struggling to forgive yourself. But I'm going to tell you that all you need is to trust God and allow Him to take your hand. Listen, all you need to say is, Lord, help me. Some people may say, I don't know how to pray, Ursula. I haven't been in church all my life. I'm going to tell you, just say, Lord, help me. And he will come in, because listen, he already knows what you're talking about. He knows exactly what you mean, because he says in Psalms 139, before you think your thoughts, I already know them from afar. So all you need is to give God an open invitation. I'm telling you, it is impossible to heal apart from God. So you may have been trying other things. Maybe you went out into the world and you tried other things. No, there's a number of things that the world will offer you. But I'm going to tell you, until you try Jesus, listen, it is the best decision you could ever make for your life. When you try Jesus, he will wipe away all of your guilt, all of your shame. Listen, though you were guilty of those things, listen, there is redemption in Christ Jesus. And so
Mm.
if you would allow him into your heart, that very thing that the enemy may be trying to tell you, you can't overcome, you can't triumph, you're not good enough, the devil is a liar. You will learn that as you get close to God and you allow him in your life, you can triumph too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Woo! Ursula. Okay. Let me tell you something. I need you to tell us where we can get this book from, because it doesn't matter. For me, I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't matter where you are, as Ursula just said, in your life. I promise you this book will bring you to that next level and put you in a position where you can triumph in your own life, in your own circumstances, whether it's on the job, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's in your homes with your children, and you're on your PTA school board, wherever it is, you really need to check this book out. Ursula, where can we find it?
Awesome. You can get it right now at Amazon. You can look up Ursula Harris, and it's called From Trauma to Triumphant. It looks like this. This is my author's copy, but you'll see this here. And you can also, if you want to learn more about me and get a signed copy from me, you can visit my website at www www.letsgettotherootllc.com.
I love that. And from there, they can go and sign up with one-on-one coaching classes with
They
you.
can do that. Yes, I would love to coach you. I would love to do that and help you get to that place that you need to be in God.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Ursula, I want to thank you so much for coming here, pouring at this well. You literally walked us step by step of how you could go from trauma to triumph. And I feel so full, and I am so appreciative to you for coming in here and just being transparent, being honest, and just pouring from a place where we can all take and begin to heal ourselves and take those next steps. Of course, get the book, ladies, get the book. I think that when you have that book, you can actually go back and revisit the chapters that you are in, because we all start in different places, right? Okay, Ursula, thank you so much for leaving us with your final thoughts. Thank you so much for coming here. And thank you so much, ladies, for listening. If you were blessed by this episode, if you have a friend or a family member who you think that would definitely benefit from this, we ask that you share it. We ask that you follow Ursula. We ask that you follow us on our YouTube, on anywhere that podcasts are played. You can download our app on Roku TV as well as Amazon Fire, and you can download our app there as well. You can listen to this on Audible as well. So we thank you, and perhaps, just maybe perhaps, you were chosen for such a time as this to write, to tell your story, your truth. Until next time, bye.